Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Audiobooks collection. I will be reading When the Moon Split by Safiur R Mubarakpuri, which we downloaded from kalamullah.com. Let's read. Page 53. Now, since the polytheists admitted that Ibrahim, Ismail and Musa, peace be upon them, were all prophets as well as men, they could no longer challenge Muhammad, peace be upon him's prophethood, arguing that he was human. Therefore, they then ridiculed the idea that Allah would appoint a once destitute orphan as his prophet. Why would Allah pass over more dignified men of the Quraysh or Taqif tribes? Why was not this Qur'an revealed to someone of great importance from either Makkah or Taif? Qur'an 43:31. Allah's reply to their question was succinct. Will they determine how to distribute the mercy of your Lord? Qur'an 43:32. The Qur'an, prophethood, inspiration, all are part of Allah's mercy, and He alone decides how it should be distributed. Allah knows best who should receive His message. Qur'an 6:124. Unable to question Allah's right to bless whomever He wished with prophethood, the polytheists now developed a different argument to discredit Muhammad, peace be upon him. Kings, they pointed out, are surrounded by splendour and vast wealth, and only the most honourable dignitaries are allowed in their presence. Such kings are aided by the wisest advisers and have hundreds of servants, bodyguards, and wives. How was it, they asked, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, the emissary of Allah, was forced to wander about in the marketplace in order to earn his bread? They say, why doesn't an angel descend from the heavens to accompany him while he admonishes us? Or why hasn't a great treasure been bestowed upon him, or a garden that he can eat from? The unjust among them say, you follow none but a man who is possessed. Qur'an 25:7-8. The polytheists argued that Muhammad, peace be upon him, if he were indeed a prophet sent by Allah, should resemble a royal dignitary. Where were his palaces, his wealth, his royal entourage? He did not even have the companionship of a single angel to help him with his preaching. The Prophet, peace be upon him, however, saw his mission in quite different terms. He was sent to deliver Allah's message to all people, rich and poor, strong and weak, free and enslaved. If he put on the airs of a king, he would not be able to reach the majority of his audience. The objectives of his mission required him to live as an ordinary human being, to show people that Islam was compatible with everyday life, and that it was not merely a tool to entertain kings, theologians, and philosophers. The Qur'an refuted the expectations of the polytheists by using one word to describe his status, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was a messenger. It might seem a little strange to us that the Quraysh would turn so viciously on one of their own. What was so unacceptable about what Muhammad, peace be upon him, preached? At the root of all the conflicts between Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the polytheists was the concept of monotheism, Tawheed, which the polytheists had corrupted into its antithesis, idolatry. At the same time, they accepted some of the components of monotheism. For example, they accepted that Allah is one in his personal self, attributes, and actions. The polytheists also agreed with the Prophet, peace be upon him, on the following points. Allah is the sole creator of the universe. He is the Lord and provider of all living beings. He alone gives and takes life, and it is He who makes independent decisions which no one can challenge. However, hand in hand with their belief in Allah's supremacy was their belief that certain individuals held special powers granted by Allah. These individuals, the polytheists claimed, could perform many miraculous feats, such as healing the sick and causing barren women to conceive. Some were believed to act as intermediaries when people prayed to them. These beings supposedly relayed the prayers to Allah. The polytheists then strove to please such people who supposedly held high-ranking stations close to Allah. By pleasing these demigods, they reason, one could please Allah. The people conceived many ways to please these friends of Allah. For example, It was common practice to build shrines over the graves of saints and holy men. People would visit these monuments with the belief that by rubbing the walls of the shrine or by walking around it several times, they would earn the favour of the person in whose honour it had been built. Some even made offerings of produce, goods, gold, and animal sacrifice. These offerings would be given to the shrine attendants, who would then place the objects before the graves or idols. Generally, nothing could be offered directly without the aid of the attendants. However, animals were presented as offerings in a number of ways. Sometimes, worshippers would leave the animals free in the name of some holy man in order to seek his pleasure. These animals would graze and roam about at will, revered by the people. Sometimes they carried the animal to the home of the holy man and had it slaughtered there. This, however, was done in the name of the holy man. The polytheists would also organise a fair once or twice a year at shrines dedicated to certain individuals, at which people gathered and performed the acts of worship and adoration mentioned above. Such fairs were often scheduled around the death anniversaries of these saints, and people would journey long distances to attend these gatherings. All these acts of worship and adoration were performed in hopes of pleasing the dead holy men and winning their intercession. The pagans would address certain saints saying, "O Father, answer my request and remove such and such hardship." The polytheists believed that the dead people that they prayed to could not only hear them, but could also answer their prayers with powers given to them by Allah or by interceding with Allah. Such were the practices of the pagans, associating partners with Allah by deifying human beings and inanimate objects, even as they denied his power to resurrect his creation. It was in this citadel of polytheism that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sent to preach the message of the one God and to teach people of his oneness. Many of the polytheists, however, viewed the message as unreasonable and untrue, and they clung to their own flawed beliefs about the nature of God. Has he made all of the gods into one God? This is something strange. We have not heard of any religion that has only one God. Surely this is nothing but an innovation. Qur'an 38:5-7. Allah engages in debate with the pagans through the verses of the Qur'an. The pagans were asked how they could tell whether or not a person had been chosen by Allah and actually possessed the power of intercession. For example, how could one be sure that a person who claimed to be close to Allah was telling the truth? Essentially, there were only two ways to determine whether or not such an individual was telling the truth: by possessing knowledge of the unseen or by having access to a divine book. Allah addresses this point in the Qur'an when he asks, "Does the unseen appear before them so that they can record it in their own books?" Qur'an 68:47. If you speak the truth, bring me a book revealed before this one or some traces of knowledge to support your claim. Qur'an 46:4. And say, do you have any proof that you can bring before us? No, because you follow nothing but conjecture and your words are only lies. Qur'an 6:148. The polytheists admitted that they did not have knowledge of the unseen, nor could they produce a divinely inspired book. Tradition and the wisdom of their ancestors were their sources of truth. The Qur'an quotes them as saying, "We found our fathers following a certain religion, and we are following in their footsteps." Qur'an 43:23. These verses highlight the ignorance and helplessness of the polytheists, and Allah makes the matter clear when he says in the Qur'an, "Truly, Allah knows, but you know not." Qur'an 16:74. Referring to saints and intercessors, Allah leaves no doubt about their status. "Verily, those whom you pray to besides Allah are servants like you, so call upon them and let them answer if you speak the truth." Qur'an 7:194. Allah challenges those who still insist there are individuals with special powers who can answer prayers. In verse after verse, Allah emphasizes the futility of praying to anyone other than Him. "Those whom you pray to other than Allah do not even possess a qitmir, the thin membrane that covers a date stone. Qur'an 35:13. If you pray to them, they will not hear you. Moreover, even if they did hear you, they could not answer your prayers. And on the day of judgment, they will deny that they asked you to worship them. Who can inform you of these things better than Allah, He who knows all things? Qur'an 35:14. Those whom they pray to, other than Allah, have not created a single thing. In fact, they themselves were created. Dead, utterly lifeless, they know not when they will be raised up. Qur'an 16:20-21. And do they associate partners with Allah that cannot create anything, partners that were created themselves? These partners cannot help those who pray to them, nor can they even help themselves. Qur'an 7:191-192. The polytheists who lived during the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, agreed with him that Allah created everything, that the gods they worshipped created nothing. How was it then, Allah asked them in the Qur'an, that they worshipped something that had been created instead of worshipping the one who created everything? The polytheists answered this by claiming that their ancestors had all prayed to other gods besides Allah. These ancestors, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's ancestors, were among them, who had believed in the power of such gods. In addition, was it not true, they asked, that their ancestors were known for their wisdom and intelligence? How then could one question their religion? Allah answers their argument in the Qur'an by challenging their ancestors' wisdom in matters of religion. He characterizes them as misguided and incapable of understanding, as seen in the following verses. They found their fathers on the wrong path, so they hastily followed their footsteps. Qur'an 37:69-70. Besides insisting on the wisdom of their polytheistic forefathers, the polytheists accused the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims of disrespect to their gods and threatened them with the wrath of these false deities. We say that some of our gods have inflicted you with madness. Qur'an 11:54. In answer to these weak threats, Allah reminds the idolaters of the absolute powerlessness of their gods. Motionless, mute, and defenseless, how could these effigies harm the Muslims or destroy them? Have they feet to walk with, hands to grasp with, eyes to see with, ears to hear with? Say, call upon those you claim to be Allah's partners, and then plot against me, and give me no respite. Qur'an 7:195. Allah sets forth a parable, saying, O people, a parable will be set before you, so listen to it carefully. Those whom you call upon and pray to besides Allah cannot create even a fly, even if they all gathered for this purpose. And if a fly should snatch anything from them, they would not be able to recover what the fly had taken from them. How feeble is the petitioner, how feeble the petitioned. Qur'an 22:73. Some of the Muslims, tired of the insults to their faith, derided the helplessness of the pagan gods, as in this taunt about an idol who could not defend itself against animal excrement. A god that lets foxes urinate over his head is certainly weak and base. Incensed, the polytheists heaped abuse on the Muslims as well as their Lord. The degeneration of a profound spiritual conflict into the puerile name-calling was stopped when Allah forbade the Muslims to indulge in petty slurs, saying, Do not insult those who worship false gods, lest they ignorantly insult Allah in return. Qur'an 6:108. As we have seen, every argument forwarded by the polytheists was refuted by Allah himself, while his Prophet, peace be upon him, went about preaching his message undeterred by their ridicule and abuse. Realizing the futility of verbal debates and disputes, the polytheists considered using force against Islam to deter people from the path of Allah. The notables and chieftains of each tribe began to ill-treat the Muslims among them, and a delegation of theirs approached Abu Talib. They demanded that he stop the Prophet, peace be upon him, from preaching. Persecution had begun in earnest, and several Muslim lives would be lost to the wrath of the Quraysh. Torture, exile, and poverty were what the Quraysh promised, while paradise and Allah's grace were the rewards promised by Allah and His Messenger, peace be upon him. Was it surprising that despite physical limitations, the early Muslims chose to trade their earthly lots for the hereafter? The persecution of the Muslims was a terrible phase in early Islam. There were numerous heart-rending incidents in which Muslims were tortured and often killed by the Quraysh. The collective memories of the early Muslim community catalogued the injuries and casualties suffered by its members, and in this biography of the Prophet of Islam, peace be upon him, it is fitting that we mention the lives and deaths of those most ardent followers, those who recognized the truth of his message and died believing in Allah and his messenger, peace be upon him. Bilal bin Rabah, may Allah be pleased with him, was the slave of Umayyah bin Khalaf. Incensed at his slave's assertion of spiritual independence, Umayyah would hand him over to the street urchins after tying a rope around his neck. As they would drag him, Bilal would recite 1, 1 in reference to the oneness of God. Umayyah would also bring Bilal out at noon and throw him on his back on the burning sand or stone with a heavy rock on his chest. Then he would say to Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, now, by God, you will lie here until you either die or deny Muhammad, peace be upon him, and worship Lat and Uzza. Bilal endured the affliction, reaffirming his faith in Allah by calling out 1, 1. Finally, the torture ended when Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, saw Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, as he was passing by. His wealth was now a tool with which to earn Allah's pleasure, and he purchased Bilal and freed him. Amir bin Fuhaira, may Allah be pleased with him, was another early believer who endured beatings so merciless that he lost his senses and did not know what he was saying. Afla, may Allah be pleased with him, also known as Abdul Faqih, was the slave of Banu Abdul Dar. He was usually taken out in the scorching heat at noon, in fetters, and forced to lie naked, with a heavy stone on his chest. Often the agony rendered him insensible. On one occasion, the pagans tied a rope around his feet and neck and dragged him about until he nearly died. He was finally rescued by Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, who, unable to see a fellow Muslim suffer, so brought him out of bondage. Afla was among the early Muslims who later migrated to Abyssinia. Khabbab ibn al-Arat, may Allah be pleased with him, a well-known companion of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was bought by a woman of Banu Khuzar named Anmar bint Sabah. He was a blacksmith, and to make Khabbab renounce his belief in the Prophet, peace be upon him, Anmar would brand him on the back with his own tools. Others would also join in the torture. They would twist his neck, pull out his hair, and even throw him on burning coals. A rock would be placed on him so that he could not move. Miraculously, Khabbab's faith grew stronger with each attempt to drive him back to disbelief. Zinera, may Allah be pleased with her, was a Roman slave girl who embraced Islam. When the pagans found out that she had become Muslim, they tortured her until she went blind and gloated that the wrath of their gods, Lat and Uzza, had caused her to go blind. It was Allah who had blinded her, she told them, and if He so willed, He would restore her eyesight. The next morning, she awoke to find her vision completely restored. Her tormentors, however, were not convinced of the miracle and claimed this was nothing more than Muhammad, peace be upon him, sorcery. Abis, may Allah be pleased with her, was a slave of Banu Zahra. She suffered at the hands of her master, Malik Aswad bin Abd Yaghouth, who began to torture her when she accepted Islam. Malik was a sworn enemy of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and used to ridicule him relentlessly. A slave of Amr bin Mu'il from Banu Adi embraced Islam. Her torturer was none other than Umar bin Khattab, who at that point was still an unbeliever. Umar, famous for his strength, would beat her until he was exhausted. He would then stop, informing her that he was not stopping out of mercy, but out of fatigue. Your Lord will also treat you accordingly, retorted the slave girl. Among the slaves who embraced Islam were also Nadia and her daughter, may Allah be pleased with them. These two were the slaves of a woman of Banu Abdul Dar. Mother and daughter suffered punishment on account of their faith until Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, bought them from their mistress and set them free. Just as he had done with Bilal, Amir bin Fuhaira and Abu Faqih, may Allah be pleased with them. His use of his wealth in this manner earned him reproof from his father, Abu Qahafa, who told him, I notice you are freeing weak hands. Had you freed strong men, they would stand you in good stead. In reply, Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, said, I seek but the pleasure of Allah. Through the following verses that were revealed, Allah indicated that Abu Bakr, may Allah be pleased with him, had succeeded in his undertaking. I warn you all of a fire blazing fiercely. None shall enter it except the most wretched, those who deny and turn away. However, the God-fearing will be saved from the fire, those who spend their wealth in order to purify themselves, who spend without seeking a reward in return. They seek only the countenance of their Lord, the Most High. Verily, soon they will be pleased. Qur'an 92:14-21. Not all the slaves who became Muslim were ransomed. Some succumbed to their injuries, while others were forced to recant in public, although they remained believers at heart. Ammar bin Yasir and his parents belonged to the Banu Makhzum tribe, of which Abu Jahl was a chieftain. Led by Abu Jahl, various people from the tribe would take Ammar and his family to Abta and leave them there in the scorching sun. The Prophet, peace be upon him, saw their plight and exhorted them to stand fast in faith, saying, Patience, O family of Yasir, patience. Your destination is paradise. O Allah, forgive the family of Yasir. And stand fast they did. Yasir, Ammar's father, bore the torture until his death. Sumaya bint Khayat, may Allah be pleased with her, the mother of Ammar, was a slave of Abu Hudayfa Makhzumi. This frail old woman died and attained the honour of being the first martyr in Islam when Abu Jahl struck a lance at her genitals. As for Ammar, the torture became unbearable for him. The polytheists would make him wear a coat of mail and put a heavy red stone on his chest. Overpowered by distress, he uttered whatever the polytheists bade him to say. However, at heart he remained full of faith. Ammar was remorseful at his body's betrayal of his heart and soul. With the revelation of the following verse, however, Ammar and all the believers were heartened, for Allah assured them that He looked at believing hearts, not at tongues weakened by torture. Those who renounce faith in Allah and open their hearts to disbelief, except for those believers who are forced to recant outwardly, will earn Allah's wrath and a great punishment. Qur'an 16:106. Jazakallah khair for listening.